Hello, this is a part 2 video for the first 9 weeks of 7th grade ELA. It is a follow-up video from the levels of questioning lesson that we have previously listed for you. This video will take levels of questioning into dialectical journals for our informational text of Written in Bone. It's a fabulous text and a bit unique for our students and for teachers as well. It's very cross-curricular, and it includes science and even math and, of course, other social studies links. It's a very different text from what our students are accustomed to reading, not just because it is informational, but also because it has quite a few pictures and illustrations and captions that also tie into this particular text. As you see on the screen, this is a sample of our dialectical journal for chapter 1, and I want to show you where I found that, just in case you're wondering. When you have signed into Canvas and you have clicked 7th grade and the first 9 weeks, this is a list of lessons and resources that you will need for the first 9 weeks instruction. And if you scroll down, 7 is levels of questioning for our previous video. And number 9 begins the Written in Bone dialectical journals. If you will notice, this would be chapter 1. 9A is chapter 2, 9B, chapters 3 and 4, and so forth. You can continue scrolling and see that we have different journals for different chapters. Some of them are combined. I also want to bring your attention also here. Under the first 9 weeks, there is a Written in Bone text, a PDF, just in case you're having trouble getting the hard copy as early as the first 9 weeks. So that will be very helpful for you and your students. Let's go back and take a peek. In this chapter 1 dialectical journal, there are already questions written for the students. They do not have to write levels of questions for this particular lesson. However, I do want to make a note for you here. This sample lesson that you will find at the bottom of this journal page, this is just for teachers, just a resource for you. But please note that these answers and questions do not parallel the actual dialectical journal. These are just some example questions for you in case you wanted to do some additional questions, or if you were having students write questions for chapter 1, maybe some examples. It even includes the different levels of questions for these. Level 1, level 2, and there is a level 3 on number 5. It also gives you an idea of what you might want to have students do in the summary section. You notice the summary section is completely blank all the way down. This is just a link to that lesson. But what you might wish for your students to do is to write a summary for each part, for each subsection of the chapter. Some teachers might wish for students to do just a summary of the entire chapter. This can be as concise as you would like for your students to write. You might want to start with each subsection and then maybe move into a bit more concise writing and maybe just have for the entire chapter. Students tend to get a bit wordy and try to use too many details instead of learning to write a summary. So it's a good practice here in writing summary statements, as well as asking and answering questions here. Also, at the bottom of this lesson, you will see vocabulary words. with the vocabulary words, there is, and let me show you here. This is the lesson if we had it pulled up. Those are some suggestions again at the top of the page. The next resource you have is a context clue sheet that the students might need to use as they find the vocabulary definitions, because we're asking them to find them using context clues and not just looking them up online or in a dictionary. So there is your questions already written for them in the Dialectical Journal for Chapter 1. And then you will notice the vocabulary, which is there as well. One suggestion here, as they are finding the definitions in the text, you probably wish for them to include the page number of where they found those definitions, and that will help you know where they found them, and it might keep them a bit more honest as well. And then if we continue scrolling, at the bottom of the lesson, you will see what else I have. This is the sample that I also had on the Google slide that I was showing you. Again, these are just suggestions. It's just a sample of other questions. These are not the answers for Chapter 1. Those are very easily found in the text itself. Okay, moving back to our slide, and let's clear that away. We are going to move to Chapter 2 for Written in Bone. Where were you? And if you will notice here, in addition to the summary section, which is again left open for your students, there is a quick question about vocabulary. And these particular words are talking about a particular skeleton that they discovered in Chapter 1, JR 1225B. This is talking about an excavation of one of our early settlements, Jamestown, and it makes a note in the text in Chapter 1 that everything they find is labeled JR, Jamestown Rediscovery, and everything is numbered, this 1225B, that is designating the skeleton that they found. JR 1225 is the grave itself. So they will refer to this particular skeleton as JR 1225B. Here, though, and I have made this larger on the right side, there is a question location for them to write a level 1, level 2, and level 3 question, as well as a place for them to answer those questions. I know that we reviewed in the last video, levels of questioning video, what types of questions level 1, 2, and 3 might be. So we're going to look at the text itself and look at some places that you might be able to help your students as they begin to learn to write those questions. I want us to note at the very beginning of this chapter, he is talking, Carter Hudgens is talking about being an archaeologist and some of the reasons. And he is talking about coming face to face with the people that he's studying and saying that they can inform us of the past through proper analysis. This is a great place to think about writing a level 3. There is a distinct way we can extend his conversation about his job to a more general or thematic way of thinking about a discussion that could include the present as well as the past. Some students, upon reading this, have had the question, the level 3 question they've written of, is it appropriate for us to excavate skeletons and study them? They have thought about, is it ethical? Is it appropriate? Is it something that we should be doing? And that could be important for any excavation, not just Jamestown. So again, we want to remember with a level 3, we are not being specific to the text, and the text will not answer the question, but rather a level 3 question will lead to a discussion. But that is a good place to begin thinking about a level 3. As we continue, you can see, again, some of the illustrations and pictures that are here in the text. And I've just copy pasted these into the slide because it's easier to mark these, and I can't do that when I go to the text itself. So I just want to point out a couple of places that might be a good spot to do a level 1 maybe. In this, it's talking about microbes. And it talks about that the microbes are tissue dissolving, and one of the reasons that bones are the remains that are left. You could do a level 1 question very easily there. What is one reason bones are often the only remains found in graves? Well, the level 1 answer would be microbes. Microbes are one reason. Why? Very easy, level 1 right here. We also could do another level 1 here, and we're talking about locating the boy's cranium, and it says that it is the highest point of the skeletal remains. So we might ask a question, another level 1 here. What did Hudgens say was the first step in locating the boy's cranium? Well, your answer could be they search for the highest point of the skeletal remains. A student might also ask another type of level 1 question, turn that around. What is usually or typically the highest point of skeletal remains? And the level 1 answer would be the cranium or skull. Again, very simple level 1. We don't have to do a lot of thinking there. It's laid out for us right there. Now, if we move to the other column, and again, this continues, then progress down the body. If you'll see, they're doing this process of very carefully using brushes to find the skeleton. And they're talking about the fragility of that skeleton. And of course, it's 4 centuries old. But they further start having this conversation about the subsoil, and the fragility is characteristic of many of these skeletons. So let's clear that away and move on to the next page. It talks about rain and water trickling down and the dense clay subsoil and the bones absorbing moisture and all of this. There's this cycle. And so we get to this statement that Hudgens estimated the condition of the boy's skeleton at only a 3 or 4. Well, this is a great place. If you noticed, it was pretty much a whole paragraph describing that process. And this could be a great place for a level 2 question. Why, and that would be really easy to just throw it in right here, why did Hudgens estimate the condition of the skeleton at only a 3 or 4? Well, they could condense this entire paragraph for a lovely level 2 answer. Again, a little further down, they talk about this process of pedestaling, where they leave the skeleton in situ, which means you don't move it, not just because of the fragility, but because of finding other pieces of evidence. So they describe this process of pedestaling the bones through here, and it continues up here. And they're starting to notice the idea that the body had been shrouded or wrapped in cloth. Now, shrouded is one of our vocabulary words for this chapter, so we would not want to use that as a level 1 question. In fact, you want to caution your students to not use vocabulary words as a level 1 question, because it could be a very easy one. If you notice, this one is shrouded, comma, or wrapped in cloth. So your definition is right there easily for you and for them. So it continues this conversation about shrouding and the location of the leg bones and all of this. And let's move to the next page. And the idea of shrouding continues here all the way through there, and even continuing here. So this could be another good place for a level 2 question where we're talking about the idea of shrouding. And we could say that why did Hudgens and Kelso believe that the skeleton or body or JR1225B's bones had been shrouded? So see, this says it provided sufficient evidence to confirm the presence of a shroud. So you could maybe ask them maybe either that question as a level 2, or another level 2 could even be describe the process that Hudgens and Kelso followed to determine if JR1225B had been shrouded. So the shrouding could be a great level 2 question. It also could lead us into a beyond the text level 3 question. There's plenty of evidence here for a level 2, but it's also a good starting point for a level 3, because then we could move that into burial practices throughout the centuries or throughout history, and bring that right into modern day. So we could come up with a level 3 question that could say, how are burial practices different today than they were in earlier time periods? And again, this would take the idea from the text here, this whole idea of shrouding, but it would bring the conversation to the present and make them think about different things that they know. That's a great level 3 question. So you see, there's more than one place where we can investigate those types of 1, 2, or 3 questions. The very next section talks about age. They can determine the age of the bones by several different ways. And of course, this would be a great place. Let me go back a second. Could be a great place for a level 2 question. How did Owsley, and again, we have Owsley here. How was Owsley able to determine the age or the approximate age of JR1225B? There are a couple of places. Notice Owsley is even mentioned here. It talks about the examination of leg bones, and this one was an adult because of the fusion that had already happened here and here that had not happened with JR1225B, thus showing that these bones were not adult but younger. And then it further has the conversation about the teeth and making comparisons. And I believe it showed that he had a wisdom tooth that had not yet come in to his mouth yet, but it showed that some second molars were worn down. And so they were able to tell with both the teeth and the bones that the teen was younger than 18 or 19 years old, placing him in his mid-teens. So again, this would be a great level 2 question where we ask, the students can ask and answer, how did Owsley use leg bones and teeth to determine that the bones of JR1225B probably belong to a teenager in his mid-teens or a teenager younger than 18 or 19 years of age. So very easily, that could be a great level 2 question where they're asked to synthesize all of this information. Furthermore, this is also a good place for a level 3. Look at this idea of X-raying. This whole idea of X-rays, this would be something that they are familiar with and could talk about uses of X-rays, and that could be a good place for a level 3. How are X-rays used? In different ways, even in dentistry. Discuss some of the different ways that X-rays are used in dentistry. So it would not just be, so the idea of X-raying is here, but we are going to expand it to a much larger conversation and one that they would be comfortable discussing because most of them have been to the dentist and maybe even the orthodontist. And especially they might be comfortable and familiar with discussing X-rays. We might also think of a level 3 question here, something to do with teeth and some kind of conversation about the difference in a child and adult's mouth and teeth. Again, the idea is in the text, but the question can extend much further away and even into our modern conversations. So those are just a few places to get you started in case your students struggle with finding a level 1, 2, or 3 question. Of course, there are many more places for a level 1, so I'm mostly focused on the level 2 or 3. But even if you'll look at illustrations, a lot of those provide, even the teeth example here, have many places for a level 1 question. So I hope this helps, and I hope you and your students both enjoy Written in Bone and completing the dialectical journals.